Ayato arrives at Seidokan Academy in the battle city of Asterisk to uncover the truth behind his missing sister, but his journey soon brings him closer to several talented young women, from the fiery Yulis to others who gradually develop feelings of their own for him. As prestigious tournaments, dangerous battles, and hidden conspiracies begin to unfold, Ayato must protect the people he cares about while facing secrets that could change all of their lives forever. But when love, ambition, and destiny collide on the battlefield, can Ayato uncover the truth about his sister without losing the people who have become the most important part of his life? One day, Ayato's older sister Haruka was engaged in a duel against a man. The battle was incredibly intense. Haruka repeatedly struck at her opponent with her weapon, but to her surprise, he was far stronger than she had expected. After being hit by one of his attacks, Haruka fell to the ground. Blood flowed from her wounds, and through the overwhelming pain, the only person she could think about was her younger brother, Ayato. She apologized because she could no longer be there to protect him. A century earlier, a great disaster known as Inversia had changed the world. The political influence of many nations declined, and in their place, a coalition of powerful conglomerates known as the Integrated Enterprise Foundation came to represent global leadership, bringing major changes to social norms and daily life. At the same time, Inversia introduced new possibilities to humanity. It led to the birth of a new type of human known as Genestella, individuals blessed with extraordinary physical abilities. Young Genestellas honed their talents through combat entertainment tournaments called Festa, held in the floating academic city of Rika, also known as Asterisk. One day, Ayato entered the room of a girl who had accidentally dropped her handkerchief. He intended to return it to her, but his face immediately turned red when he realized she was in the middle of changing clothes. Ayato quickly apologized and explained that he had only come to return the handkerchief she had dropped. The girl asked him to turn around. Feeling extremely embarrassed, she raised her voice in surprise. Ayato immediately turned away and the girl hurriedly finished getting dressed. Ayato thought that if he explained the situation properly, she would surely understand. After changing, the girl asked for her handkerchief. Nervously, Ayato handed it back to her. She was deeply touched, and Ayato slowly approached her while explaining that he had picked it up after the wind had carried it away. The girl sincerely thanked him and mentioned that the handkerchief was very important to her. Ayato felt a little embarrassed by her heartfelt reaction. Unexpectedly, after expressing her gratitude, the girl suddenly prepared to attack Ayato. Sensing the intimidating aura surrounding her, Ayato immediately focused on avoiding her Amaryllis attack. An explosion erupted, but fortunately, Ayato managed to leap to safety beforehand. The girl continued chasing him and was surprised that he had been able to evade her attack. Deciding to take the situation more seriously, she intensified her pursuit. Meanwhile, a crowd began gathering to watch the commotion. Ayato could not understand why she was attacking him after thanking him just moments earlier. The girl admitted that she was grateful for the return of her handkerchief, but she could not overlook the fact that Ayato had entered the girl's dormitory and accidentally seen her while she was changing clothes. She felt that he should take responsibility for his actions. Ayato was stunned by how quickly the situation had escalated. He explained that he had only recently transferred to the academy and had not known that the building was a girl's dormitory. The girl accepted his explanation, but she still believed the matter could not simply be ignored. She then introduced herself as Yulis, the 5th-ranked student at Seidokan Academy. Yulis challenged Ayato to a duel. If Ayato won, she would forgive him. However, if Yulis won, Ayato would have to comply with the condition of her choosing. Ayato hesitated to accept because he did not even have a sword. Suddenly, one of the spectators tossed a sword toward him. With some reluctance, Ayato accepted the challenge. Ayato then activated his Ogre Lux, and the crowd erupted with cheers. Yulis was widely known as the Glimmering Flame Witch. She explained that under Asterisk's duel rules, victory was achieved by destroying the opponent's emblem. As soon as the duel began, Yulis launched a piercing attack with her Longiflorum spear. The moment the strike was aimed at him, Ayato swiftly dodged and deflected it. Yulis immediately increased the speed of her spear assaults. Ayato skillfully parried and evaded every attack, even as his breathing became increasingly heavy. The spectators were impressed by the abilities of the new transfer student. Many began wondering whether Yulis had been holding back. Yulis herself was surprised, as her attacks were normally more than enough to overwhelm an ordinary opponent. Convinced that she still held the advantage, she decided to prove her superiority. She unleashed an Amaryllis attack. Rather than retreating, Ayato charged directly toward the massive attack. He intended to use close-range combat to break through it. Seeing his approach, Yulis immediately detonated the Amaryllis attack the moment Ayato entered its effective range. Seeing the massive explosion, Yulis was convinced that Ayato had no chance of escaping an attack from such a close range. However, while standing at the center of the blast, Ayato used the Twin Dragon Sword style. A moment later, he suddenly leaped toward Yulis after noticing an incoming attack aimed in her direction. Ayato pushed Ulysses out of the way, preventing her from being struck. The two of them fell to the ground together. Ulysses' face immediately turned red when she realized that Ayato had landed on top of her. As she glanced to the side, she noticed a spear of light embedded nearby and became certain that she had been its intended target. She demanded to know why Ayato had done such a thing, but Ayato was confused, believing that question should have been directed at Silas, the one who had thrown the spear of light. Ulysses grew even more embarrassed when she noticed that one of Ayato's hands had accidentally landed on her chest. Ayato immediately realized what had happened, quickly moved away, and sincerely apologized for the accident. The other students were astonished that Ayato had somehow managed to bring Ulysses to the ground. At that moment, Ulysses was extremely annoyed with him and looked ready to continue their confrontation. Suddenly, Claudia arrived and stepped in to stop the duel. Ulysses questioned what authority Claudia had to interfere in her affairs. Claudia then deactivated their badges and explained that she had the authority to do so as the vice president of the Red Lotus. She informed them that Ayato was not yet officially a student of Seidokan Academy because his enrollment documents had not been fully processed. Claudia then introduced herself as the president of Seidokan Academy's student council. As it turned out, she was also a first-year student, just like Ayato. However, she had been studying at the academy since middle school. As they walked together through the school corridors, Claudia asked Ayato not to be overly formal with her. In return, Ayato requested that she stop speaking so formally as well. Claudia explained that it was simply part of her etiquette and not something he needed to worry about. She jokingly described herself as a cunning person and said that being polite in public was the least she could do. She even humorously claimed that her mind was so dark it was as if it had been coated in black honey. A moment later, she made another playful joke that completely caught Ayato off guard. Claudia laughed and admitted that she simply enjoyed seeing his amusing reactions. Claudia then invited Ayato into her room and welcomed him to Asterisk. Ayato was immediately captivated by the breathtaking view of the city. Claudia explained that, as a transfer student attending Seidokan Academy on a scholarship, she had one expectation for him: victory. She proceeded to introduce the 6 academies of Asterisk: Garrardworth, Alicant, Geelong, La Wolf, Queenvale, and Seidokan. These 6 institutions gathered selected Genestella from all over the world so they could develop and refine their abilities. Every year, the 6 academies competed in a series of tournaments known as Festa. These battles between Genestella were major international events that attracted worldwide attention and could be considered one of the primary reasons Asterisk had been established. Unfortunately, Seidokan Academy's performance had declined over the past few years. Claudia asked Ayato to participate in the Festa, explaining that if he achieved success, the academy would be willing to grant whatever wish he desired. Ayato admitted that he was not particularly interested in that offer. Claudia then asked what his true reason was for coming to the academy. Ayato wanted to know whether his older sister Haruka had once attended Seidokan Academy. Claudia accessed the academy's student records and discovered information about a student who matched that name. Haruka had enrolled at Seidokan approximately 5 years earlier, but after attending for only 6 months, she had withdrawn due to personal reasons. Beyond that, almost all records related to her had been erased. There were also no records indicating that Haruka had ever participated in the Festa or appeared in any of the academy's named lists. In fact, even the evidence that she had attended Seidokan at all seemed uncertain. Claudia then showed Ayato information about Cerberesta, one of the academy's Ogre Lux weapons. It was an extraordinarily powerful weapon equipped with a highly advanced Manadite core and was regarded as one of the most formidable Ogre Lux in existence. Although there were no records showing that Cerberesta had ever been officially used, battle data associated with it still existed. Based on the available information, Claudia believed that Haruka was most likely no longer connected to the academy, a conclusion she deeply regretted. Ayato thanked Claudia for sharing everything she had discovered. However, he explained that he had not come to the academy solely to search for Haruka. According to Ayato, the real reason he had come to Asterisk was to discover his own identity and purpose. Claudia smiled and remarked that Ayato was the kind of person who was very difficult to persuade. Claudia explained that scholarship transfer students were authorized to use the academy's Ogre Lux weapons, including Cerberesta. She planned to prepare the necessary authorization documents first, and in the meantime, she would provide Ayato with a different weapon. Ayato asked about his enrollment paperwork, which he believed was still incomplete. Unexpectedly, Claudia embraced him from behind, catching him off guard. She expressed her happiness that she and Ayato had finally met again. Confused by her remark, Ayato did not understand what she meant. Claudia then admitted that she had only been teasing him. It turned out that the claim about his incomplete enrollment documents had been false. Claudia confessed that she had made up the story for a good reason, and Ayato had already been officially accepted as a student at the academy. The excuse had been extremely effective in stopping the duel between Ayato and Ulysses. so there were actually no remaining documents for him to take care of. When classes began, the teacher introduced Ayato to the rest of the students. She hoped everyone would get along well with him. The teacher then assigned Ayato a seat near Yuli's because the two of them were already being seen as troublemakers. Yuli's immediately objected to that label. The teacher pointed out that both of them had caused quite a commotion earlier that morning. Ayato quickly headed to his seat. As soon as the lunch break started, Ayato greeted Yuli's. Yuli's thanked him for helping her earlier that morning. Ayato asked whether she was still upset with him. Yuli's remembered what had happened between them and admitted that she was not pleased with his actions. However, she also acknowledged that he had helped her. She considered it a debt of gratitude and stated that she would be willing to help him once if he ever needed it. Even so, she made it clear that she had no intention of becoming particularly close to him. The student sitting behind Ayato commented that Princess Yuli's had always been difficult to approach. He introduced himself as Eiichiro and revealed that he was also Ayato's roommate. As they walked through the school corridors together, Ayato asked whether Eiichiro's reference to Yuli's as a princess was merely a nickname. Eiichiro explained that Yuli's was an actual princess. After the inversion, several European kingdoms had risen to prominence again, including the kingdom of Lusitania, where Yuli's belonged to the royal family. She was also one of the rare Genistella known as a Striga. Ayato was surprised by how much Eiichiro knew about Yuli's. Eiichiro explained that he was a member of the school newspaper club. Curious, Ayato asked why Yuli's fought so often. Eiichiro replied that many people wondered the same thing. Despite being kind, powerful, and a princess, Yuli's constantly attracted attention. However, she had a strict personality and disliked becoming the subject of gossip. Many students disliked her and frequently challenged her to duels. Yuli's defeated every challenger, rapidly climbing the rankings until she reached 5th place. Unfortunately, the result was that she became increasingly isolated from those around her. Later, Ayato returned Eiichiro's sword and thanked him sincerely, believing that Eiichiro had helped him avoid the duel. Eiichiro was puzzled and wondered how Ayato had known the sword belonged to him. Ayato explained that he seemed to recognize people through their voices. Eiichiro was amazed that Ayato had been able to distinguish his voice in the middle of a crowded area and even remember it afterward. Ayato mentioned that his older sister had always taught him to return anything he borrowed. Suddenly, they heard an angry young man demanding to know why Yuli's had chosen to duel a new student. Yuli's showed little interest in the complaint. She pointed out that she had already defeated him 3 times and saw no reason to accept another challenge from him. Ayato asked who the young man was. Eiichiro explained that he was Lester, the 9th-ranked student and one of the Page 1 members. He went on to explain that the ranking system at Asterisk was known as the named cults, while the top 12 students were referred to as Page 1. Lester was fairly strong and frequently clashed with Yuli's, although she had already defeated him 3 times. Without warning, Lester slammed his weapon against the ground and aggressively demanded another duel. Yuli's friends wanted to calm the situation before it escalated. Instead, Yuli's challenged Lester to prove himself by defeating someone other than her. Lester grabbed Yuli's arm and argued that he should not keep losing to a princess whom he believed fought only for personal enjoyment. Those words immediately angered Yuli's. With a fierce expression, she firmly declared that she fought to fulfill her responsibilities by participating in Festa and achieving the goals she sought. For that reason, she intended to keep moving forward no matter what stood in her way. As her emotions rose, brilliant flames began to shimmer around her body. Watching the scene unfold, Ayato thought of Yuli's as a girl clad in fiery armor, a dazzling witch surrounded by flames. When Ayato was still a child, Haruka reminded him not to fight because their father might get angry. However, Ayato admitted that he could not accept other people making fun of his older sister. Haruka explained that their father forbade Ayato from fighting because he possessed tremendous power. That power could not only hurt other people, but also harm Ayato himself. Ayato admitted that he did not understand what Haruka meant. Haruka firmly stated that it was not yet time for Ayato to fight, and that he could do so once he had found his true self. She explained that would be the moment when he understood the purpose of using that power. Ayato asked whether Haruka had already found her true self. Hearing that, Haruka replied that her true self was to become Ayato's protector because that was the most important thing in her life. Haruka embraced her younger brother, and Ayato said that he would protect his older sister as well. Haruka was deeply moved by his words. That childhood memory appeared in Ayato's dream. Later that night, Ayato woke up from his sleep. That afternoon, Ayato was jogging around the dormitory grounds. Before long, he spotted Yuli's together with Lester. Ayato greeted Yuli's. Yuli's asked what he was doing there. Lester had just learned that Ayato was the transfer student. He appeared annoyed and approached him. Ayato introduced himself and greeted Lester, but Lester immediately challenged him. Suddenly, Eiichiro arrived to record the situation. Seeing this, Lester's friends stopped him and asked Lester to calm down. Lester declared that he would not give up and would make Yuli's acknowledge his abilities. After Lester and the others left, Yuli's commented on Ayato's remarkable courage after witnessing the duel that morning and his calm attitude while facing Lester. Ayato smiled after hearing the compliment. Yuli's wondered how long he would be able to remain so calm because this place was not as easy as he seemed to think. Ayato asked why Yuli's fought there despite being a princess. Yuli's admitted that she did it for money. Her first goal was the Phoenix Festa, so she needed to achieve that objective first. Suddenly, Eiichiro appeared and mentioned that Yuli's would need a partner because the Phoenix Festa was a 2-on-2 competition. Ayato asked whether Yuli's did not have any friends. Yuli's looked embarrassed and insisted that not having a partner did not mean she had no friends. She explained that she simply had not found the right partner yet. Ayato smiled as he watched Yuli's awkwardly deny that she lacked friends. Eiichiro asked about the qualifications required to become Yuli's partner. Yuli's explained that her standards were not excessive. The person needed strength equivalent to a page 1 student, quick thinking, strong determination, and a noble spirit similar to that of a knight. Not long afterward, Eiichiro excused himself because he had another appointment. Yuli's was about to leave as well, but Ayato asked where the boys' dormitory was located. Hearing that, Yuli's laughed. She pointed out that Ayato had already gotten into trouble that morning for entering the girls' dormitory, and in her opinion, he should have studied the school map first. Ayato was surprised to discover that Yuli's could laugh so naturally. Yuli's immediately blushed and insisted that she obviously laughed from time to time. Feeling flustered, she then pointed him toward the boys' dormitory. Ayato asked whether she would be willing to show him around the school and the city. Yuli's wondered why she should do that. Ayato replied that she only needed to help him this one time because he wanted to become familiar with his new school. Yuli's could not refuse because she still owed him a favor. She agreed to show him around the school after classes and take him around the city during the weekend. The following morning, Ayato headed to school with Eiichiro. As soon as he spotted Yuli's ahead of him, he greeted her. Yuli's returned the greeting, causing the students in the classroom to stare in shock. It was unusual for Yuli's to respond to greetings. Yuli's became irritated and accused everyone of being rude. Ayato smiled as he watched her reaction. Suddenly, a girl sitting beside him began staring at him. Ayato realized that he knew her. The girl's name was Saya. He was surprised to see her there. Eiichiro could hardly believe that Ayato and Saya already knew each other. Both Ayato and Saya looked surprised. Ayato remarked that Saya looked exactly the same as she had 6 years ago. Saya immediately disagreed and stood up, insisting that she had grown taller. Eiichiro jokingly commented that their reunion must have been fate. Ayato then asked about Saya's father. Saya replied that he was doing very well and was still as energetic as ever. It turned out that her father was the one who encouraged her to enroll in the academy so she could test one of the weapons he had developed. Saya also had her own personal reason for attending, so she did not mind the arrangement. Eiichiro became curious about her reason, but Saya refused to explain. She then pointed her weapon toward Ernesta and warned her not to spread false information. Not long after, Ms. Kyoko entered the classroom and prepared to start the lesson. She addressed Saya about her absence from school the previous day and asked for the reason. Saya explained that she had overslept. Ms. Kyoko laughed and lightly tapped Saya on the head. It turned out that Saya had already skipped school several times before, so Ms. Kyoko warned her not to do it again. Otherwise, she would have to attend additional classes. Ayato was not surprised to learn that Saya still had trouble waking up early in the morning. Yuli's looked irritated as she watched how comfortable Ayato and Saya seemed around each other. After school, Yuli's checked her reflection and fixed her hair before heading out with Ayato. At that moment, Ayato was busy chatting with Saya when Yuli's interrupted their conversation. Ayato asked whether Yuli's was ready, and she admitted that she was simply keeping the promise she had made. Saya became curious about the promise Yuli's was referring to. Ayato explained that Yuli's had promised to show him around the academy. Saya wondered why it had to be Yuli's. Yuli's had no intention of explaining herself because she considered it none of Saya's business. Just as Yuli's and Ayato were about to leave, Saya offered to show Ayato around the academy herself because it seemed as though Yuli's was only doing it out of obligation. Yuli's insisted that she would never break a promise she had made. Saya argued that if Yuli's was only forcing herself to do it, then Ayato would be better off touring the academy with her instead. Yuli's denied feeling forced in any way. She pointed out that she had been studying at the academy since middle school, while Saya had only enrolled that year. Neither of them wanted to back down, and Ayato felt uncomfortable watching the situation unfold. Suddenly, Claudia appeared and linked her arm with Ayato's. She claimed that she was actually the most suitable person to guide him around because Yuli's had transferred to the academy during her 3rd year, while Claudia had been there since her 1st year. Saya and Yuli's could not understand why Claudia had decided to get involved. Claudia put on a pleading expression, but both Yuli's and Saya firmly rejected the idea. Claudia explained that she had come to deliver some documents for Ayato. She informed him that the Ogre Lux selection process and compatibility test would take place the next day, and she asked him to sign the paperwork. Ulysses found it strange that the student council president had personally delivered documents to Ayato. This made Ayato curious about whether Claudia and Ulysses were friends. Claudia admitted that they were, but Ulysses denied it. According to Ulysses, they were merely acquaintances who had met during an opera ceremony in Vienna. After that, Ulysses and Saya urged Claudia to leave. Before departing, Claudia reminded Ayato that he would be spending the entire next day with her. Hearing that made Ulysses visibly annoyed. She complained that Claudia seemed overly playful and confident because of her appearance. To ease the tension, Ayato suggested that both Ulysses and Saya accompany him on the tour together. Ulysses and Saya agreed since neither of them wanted the disagreement to escalate further. Ayato felt relieved when they accepted the idea. Ulysses then guided Ayato to the buildings dedicated to extracurricular activities as well as the academy committee facilities. She also took him to the cafeteria. Throughout the tour, Saya frequently added comments whenever Ulysses explained something about the school. Ulysses firmly stated that she had not intended to show the academy to Saya. In response, Saya admitted that she was actually terrible at finding her way around the campus. Ulysses could not understand why Saya had wanted to guide Ayato earlier if that was the case. To prevent another argument from breaking out, Ayato suggested taking a short break and went to buy drinks. As soon as Ayato left, Saya asked why Ulysses had been the one chosen to show him around the academy. Ulysses explained that she owed Ayato a favor. Saya became even more curious about what Ulysses meant. Ulysses revealed that it was related to a certain incident during the duel the previous day. Until then, Saya had not even known about Ulysses and Ayato's duel. Ulysses further explained that someone had interfered with the match, causing it to be called off. Saya found it strange that Ulysses had come out of the duel without any injuries. Saya acknowledged that Ulysses was strong, but she believed that Ulysses' abilities were roughly on the same level as her own. Because of that, she felt that Ulysses was not an ideal match for Ayato. Ulysses was surprised by Saya's confidence and challenged her to find out which of them was stronger. Just as the two were about to begin competing, 3 arrows suddenly flew toward them. Fortunately, both reacted quickly and avoided them. Ulysses immediately recognized the arrows as being identical to the ones that had been fired at her during the duel the day before. Spotting an archer in the distance, she launched a longiflorum attack toward the attacker. However, another individual intervened and blocked the attack. A moment later, Saya fired her own attack and successfully struck one of the attackers. The weapon she used was the Type 38 grenade launcher Lux Helnicrum. Saya launched another attack and successfully hit a second attacker who had been positioned near a pool. The impact caused the pool to break apart, sending water everywhere. The resulting splash soaked both Saya and Ulysses. Ulysses never expected that the small-framed Saya possessed such a formidable weapon. Saya asked whether they still wanted to test her strength. Ulysses smiled and acknowledged how impressive Saya was. Not long afterward, Ayato arrived and was surprised by the condition of both Saya and Ulysses. Ulysses quickly became embarrassed when she realized that her soaked clothing had become partially see-through. She immediately covered herself and warned Ayato not to look her way. Ulysses also told Saya to cover herself properly. To her surprise, Saya was not wearing any undergarments. Saya simply replied that she had not felt the need for them yet. The next day, Claudia brought up the previous incident while talking with Ayato. Ayato asked whether the culprit had been caught. The disciplinary committee had already begun an investigation, but the suspect had disappeared without leaving any useful clues behind. Ayato felt that the incident was clearly a criminal act. Claudia explained that Asterisk had its own security organization, but its authority did not extend into the academies. If Ulysses were willing to cooperate, they might be able to take further action. Ayato was also puzzled by Ulysses' stubborn refusal to be investigated or placed under protection. Claudia explained that Ulysses worked tirelessly to protect what was most precious to her. Whenever she tried to accept something new, she feared losing what she had been holding on to for so long. As they stepped out of the elevator, they ran into Lester. Claudia mentioned that Lester had also come to borrow an Ogre Lux. Lester looked irritated and asked what Ayato was doing there. Claudia was surprised to learn that Lester and Ayato already knew each other. Ayato asked what was required to borrow an Ogre Lux. Claudia explained that the process was fairly simple. The compatibility level between the Ogre Lux and its user would be measured, and if the compatibility exceeded 80%, the Ogre Lux could be borrowed. Meanwhile, Lester was preparing for his compatibility test. Claudia was surprised that Lester wanted to borrow Serveresta as well, and she wondered why he had chosen that particular Ogre Lux. It was Ayato's first time seeing Serveresta in person. His older sister had once borrowed it, and simply looking at it caused his heartbeat to quicken as he sensed something unusual. Lester attempted to use Serveresta, but unfortunately his compatibility rating reached only 32%. Frustrated by the result, Lester suddenly found himself thrown back. Servaresta had rejected him. Ayato had heard that some Ogre Lux possessed wills of their own, and that appeared to be exactly what was happening. Lester tried again. His determination to challenge the Ogre Lux was understandable, but Servaresta was not the kind of weapon that could be subdued through force alone. Lester grew increasingly frustrated as Servaresta refused to respond to him. He continued pushing himself, causing his compatibility rating to drop dramatically, eventually falling into negative numbers. Continuing any further would have been far too dangerous. Suddenly, Servaresta turned toward Ayato. Ayato approached it cautiously. The Ogre Lux continued focusing on him and even tore part of his clothing. Ayato turned around, and when Servaresta moved toward him, he immediately caught it and drove it firmly into the floor with all his strength. Ayato remarked that, just like Servaresta, he also disliked being forced into something against his will. Ayato successfully subdued Servaresta. To everyone's surprise, his compatibility rating reached 97%. However, his clothing had been torn, and his hand was injured during the process. That night, Ayato secretly entered the girls' dormitory by climbing through a window and making his way to Claudia's room. Earlier, after Claudia had finished bandaging his injured hand, she had asked him to come to her room because she needed his help with something. When Ayato arrived, Claudia was in the bathroom getting ready for the evening. As Ayato entered the room, Claudia had just finished and stepped out. She greeted him with a warm smile, while Ayato appeared noticeably nervous. Ayato arrived outside Claudia's room while she was freshening up in the bathroom. He stepped inside and was surprised to see Claudia just coming out of the bathroom. Ayato immediately became nervous when he saw her smiling at him. He had not expected Claudia's room to be so spacious, and he wondered whether that was one of the privileges that came with being the student council president. Claudia denied that assumption. The room was actually a privilege she received because of her academic ranking. Students who climbed high enough in the rankings to reach page 1 were provided with luxurious accommodations. Ayato had not realized that Claudia was a member of page 1. Claudia commented that being the student council president was mostly troublesome and not really worth the effort involved. Ayato then asked why she had chosen to take on the position. Claudia admitted that the reason she became student council president was simply because she enjoyed taking on challenging responsibilities. Ayato realized that the reason Claudia had called him over was probably related to one of those responsibilities. Claudia then showed him a list of students who were supposed to participate in the Festa Phoenix. However, several of them had withdrawn due to injuries they had suffered over the past few weeks. The causes of the injuries varied, but it seemed that they had been targeted by outsiders, much like what had happened to Ulis. The disciplinary committee suspected Lester and Randy because neither of them had an alibi during the most recent incident. Ayato pointed out that without evidence, no action could be taken against them. Claudia explained that she believed she could predict the next target, Ulis. She asked Ayato to stay close to Ulis for the time being because she was convinced that Ulis might not be able to handle another incident on her own. Ayato wondered why he had to be the one to do it. Claudia explained that Ulis was not particularly close to anyone, but she seemed to be gradually opening up to Ayato. Ayato mentioned that he and Ulis were already planning to meet over the weekend. Claudia smiled and remarked that Ayato could be surprisingly oblivious at times. Ayato was curious about why Claudia cared so much about Ulis. Claudia simply replied that it was the duty of a student council president to protect the students of the academy. She hoped that every student would be able to discover their own path in life, just as she had, and she believed that supporting them was an important part of making that happen. Since she had asked him for a favor, Claudia wanted to offer something in return. She playfully moved closer and jokingly suggested an outrageous reward. The unexpected comment startled Ayato, and in a panic, he quickly headed for the door. Before leaving, he promised that he would accept her request and help out. After stepping out of Claudia's room, Ayato found himself thinking about what it meant to discover one's true path. Over the weekend, Ayato met up with Ulis and spent some time walking around the city with her. He was captivated by how different she looked in her casual clothes. Ulis noticed him staring and wondered what was wrong. Ayato apologized and explained that she simply looked different from her usual self. He also complimented her outfit, saying that it suited her very well. Hearing that made Ulis blush and she became visibly flustered. The two of them eventually made their way to the main stage, the Pride of Asterisk. Every Festa final match was held there. In addition to the main stage, Asterisk also had 3 other stages of the same size, 7 medium-sized stages, and countless smaller stages scattered throughout the city. Official duels were supposed to take place on city stages as a matter of etiquette, although many people ignored that rule. Ayato admitted that he would not want to live in a city where things worked that way, and Ulis agreed with him. Wanting to spend more time together, Ayato suggested getting something to eat. Ulis chose a hamburger restaurant. Once their meals arrived, she dug in enthusiastically. Ayato asked whether she was really a princess, since princesses did not usually seem like the type to eat at hamburger restaurants. Yuli's replied that it was merely a stereotype. She had learned about hamburger restaurants from friends back where she used to live. The conversation eventually shifted to the attack that Yuli's had experienced earlier. Ayato hoped that she would avoid going out alone and stay away from unnecessary duels for a while. Yuli's rejected the suggestion. She refused to let people like that limit her freedom. She intended to find her own way forward and did not want others deciding things for her. At that moment, Lester appeared and mocked her determination, bringing up the fact that she had recently been targeted. Yuli's confidently replied that she would never back down from an opponent standing right in front of her. Lester declared that he wanted to be that opponent, but Yuli's still refused because she had no interest in fighting him. Frustrated, Lester raised his voice, causing nearby people to become uneasy. Ayato then pointed out that if Yuli's considered people who attacked others from behind to be cowards, then those were the kinds of opponents she looked down on. Lester became furious at being compared to such people. He activated his Ogre Lux and challenged Ayato to a duel. However, Ayato declined, explaining that he had no reason to fight. That response only made Lester angrier. Fortunately, Lester's companions stepped in and tried to calm him down. They reminded him that he was not the kind of person who looked for excuses to challenge others to fights. After hearing their words, Lester finally decided to leave. Yuli's smiled at Ayato and said that he was quite brave. She then wiped the sauce off Ayato's face with a tissue. She had never expected Ayato to be someone who was always full of surprises. After they finished eating, Ayato and Yuli's continued their walk around the city. Suddenly, they noticed several students from the Wolf Academy who appeared to be preparing for a fight. As they clashed with one another, Yuli's quickly realized what was happening. She was convinced that those people were trying to lure her into a trap, something that had happened many times before. People often cause disturbances as a way to surround and corner her. Ayato asked whether that meant those people were specifically targeting Yuli's. However, Yuli's was not completely sure, since they could simply be mercenaries hired to do whatever job they were paid for. Without warning, a spear flew toward Yuli's. Fortunately, she reacted in time and dodged the attack. Seeing no other choice, she decided to defend herself. Yuli's unleashed her flame abilities and quickly overwhelmed her attackers. Yuli's defeated them all in a short time and demanded to know who had sent them. It turned out that they did not know. They had only been paid to harm Yuli's and Ayato. Yuli's then asked for a description of the person who hired them. According to them, the individual was heavily built and dressed entirely in black. Surprisingly, the suspect was still nearby. Yuli's immediately ran after him. Ayato warned her not to pursue the person too far. As Yuli's gave chase, another attacker suddenly struck from a different direction. Fortunately, she swiftly avoided the incoming arrow. Ayato hurried after her to make sure she was safe. To his surprise, another assailant was flying near him. Just as the attacker prepared to shoot another arrow at Yuli's, Ayato called out to warn her. The attacker then redirected the shot toward Ayato. Fortunately, Ayato used his weapon to deflect the arrow. One of the arrows came dangerously close to him and tore part of his clothing. Yuli's was extremely worried about Ayato. She scolded him for being reckless, saying that he should have avoided the attack instead of allowing his weapon to be damaged. Ayato replied that he had simply done the best he could. Realizing that they could not continue fighting against such large numbers, Yuli's decided that they should leave before the security organization arrived. As they departed, Yuli's asked whether Ayato still had some time to spend with her. That night, Ayato arrived at Yuli's room through the window. Yuli's approached him and asked him to take off his jacket. Ayato was startled and confused by the request. Yuli's found his reaction strange and quickly realized that he had misunderstood her intentions. She explained that she had only called him over because she wanted to repair the tear in his clothing. Ayato asked whether Yuli's knew how to sew. Although she admitted that she was not an expert, she said that she could manage it. Yuli's explained that his clothes had been damaged because of the incident involving her, and she did not want to owe him anything more. Ayato handed the damaged clothing to Yuli's. She immediately began sewing it while Ayato sat on her bed. Ayato asked whether a friend had taught her how to sew. Yuli's was surprised that he knew that. However, Ayato admitted that he had only made a guess. As Yuli's continued sewing, Ayato looked around her room. His attention was drawn to a photograph displayed on top of a table. He asked whether the picture showed Yuli's and her friends. Yuli's was startled and told him not to look through her personal things without permission. Ayato guessed that the girl standing in the center of the photo was Yuli's. Yuli's admitted that he was right. The photograph had been taken with her childhood friends. She explained that she had been quite tomboyish when she was younger. Back then, Yuli's often sneaked out of the palace. One day, she became lost in a poor district and was dragged into an alley by a group of criminals. Frightened and unable to do anything, she could only cry. Fortunately, the friends in that photograph arrived and rescued her. After returning to the palace, Yulise learned that they were actually orphans living in a rundown orphanage. From that point on, she frequently sneaked out to spend time with them. Ayato asked whether those children had known that Yulise was a princess. Yulise explained that she had kept her identity a secret from them, although the nuns at the orphanage had already known who she was. The orphanage had originally been established through a foundation created by Yulise's late mother. However, the foundation had gradually run out of funding, and its financial situation became worse every year. That was the reason Yulise chose to enroll in the academy and compete in the Festa tournaments. At the time, the orphanage's greatest need was financial support. Ayato asked why she did not simply request money from the kingdom. Yulise explained that it was not that simple. She could not freely ask the kingdom for funding whenever she wanted. The kingdom itself was under the administration of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation, which meant that development budgets and financial support required officially recognized sources of income and proper approval procedures. Because of that, Yulise needed to earn the money herself. Fortunately, she possessed the abilities of a Striga, giving her the opportunity to compete and work towards supporting the orphanage through her own efforts. Yulise did not even mind if her title as a princess was nothing more than a nickname to her. Ayato had never expected that this was the reason Yulise had come to the academy. Yulise said that the city was cruel and unreasonable, forcing students to compete against one another while the entire world watched with endless fascination. A whirlwind of greed had consumed everything and continued to attract more and more spectators. Even so, the city was also the place closest to fulfilling all kinds of wishes. Yulise admitted that she had come to achieve what she wanted for herself, not because someone else had told her to. She chose to do what she believed in at that moment, and that was why she fought. Before long, Yulise finished her sewing. She handed the repaired clothing back to Ayato and told him to leave. Ayato thanked her and Yulise replied that they were even now. Ayato then looked at Yulise's handkerchief from earlier. Yulise explained that it had been a birthday gift from her friends. The handkerchief had been specially embroidered for her, and the embroidery was made by one of her closest friends. Because of that, Yulise treasured it as one of her most valuable possessions. The next day at school, Ayato greeted Yulise while she was deeply focused on reading a letter. Yulise was startled before returning his greeting. She quickly left the classroom and told Ayato that she had something important to take care of that day. Eiichiro commented that Yulise seemed to be acting like her old self again. Not long afterward, Claudia approached Ayato. She asked what was troubling him since he looked so worried. Ayato explained that Yulise had received a letter that morning and had left with a gloomy expression. Claudia said that it likely meant Yulise was dealing with a problem. Ayato became even more concerned, and Eiichiro suspected that the letter might have come from the person who had targeted Yulise before. Meanwhile, Yulise was running toward a certain location. At that moment, Ayato wondered why she had not told him anything. He began to think that perhaps Yulise did not trust him. Claudia, however, believed the opposite. As she had said before, Yulise always did everything she could to protect the things she cared about, and Claudia was certain that Ayato was one of them. Ayato was surprised to hear that Yulise had been protecting him. At the same time, Yulise arrived at her destination, unaware that someone appeared to be following her. Ayato then remembered Haruka's words from long ago. Haruka had once said that her purpose was to protect him, and Ayato promised that he would protect Haruka in return. Back then, he had not fully understood the meaning of those words, but now he was determined to pursue that answer. Ayato immediately set off and Claudia handed him Servaresta. Taking it with him, he continued running in search of Yulise. At that moment, Ayato finally realized the purpose he had been searching for all this time. He had decided that his purpose was to become Yulise's protector. Without hesitation, Ayato leaped down from the academy building in order to find Yulise. No matter what happened, he was determined to keep protecting her. That day, Yulise went to meet someone after reading a letter. She arrived at a location near an old building. Suddenly, part of the building's ceiling collapsed and fell toward her. Reacting quickly, Yulise used Red Crown to destroy the falling debris. Yulise declared that tricks like that no longer worked against her and demanded that the person behind it reveal himself. A student named Silas stepped forward and greeted her with a chilling smile. He asked how she had figured out that he was responsible. Yulise explained that Silas had given himself away through his own words. Earlier, he had stopped Lester by saying that Lester was not the kind of coward who would look for an opportunity to challenge Yulise to a duel. The media had reported that Yulise had been attacked, but no reports had ever mentioned Lester being involved. Because of that, Yulise was convinced that Silas either witnessed the incident himself or had been informed by someone directly connected to it. In other words, only the culprit or the culprit's associates could have known those details. Lester realized how careless he had been and became convinced that Ayato had intentionally led him into revealing information. Yulise suspected the same thing, believing that Ayato had carefully anticipated the situation. Silas admitted that changing his target had been the right decision because Ayato had become a major obstacle to any plan against Yulise. He was certain that Ulis had come alone to prevent anyone else from getting involved. Silas then proposed a deal. He wanted Ulis to withdraw from the Phoenix tournament. Ulis found the suggestion ridiculous and questioned why she should listen to him when she could simply put an end to the situation right there. At that moment, Lester appeared and confronted Silas about everything he had done. Lester explained that he had come because Ulis had agreed to duel him, but he had never expected Silas to be behind the attacks. Ulis believed that Silas had been hired by students from another school to target participants in the Phoenix tournament. Lester was shocked that Silas would betray fellow students for personal gain. Silas laughed at the idea of friendship. In his view, the students at their academy were constantly competing against one another. Since everyone treated each other as rivals, he saw nothing wrong with using that situation to benefit himself. Angered by Silas's attitude, Lester demanded an explanation for why he had been summoned there. Silas revealed his plan. According to him, Lester would be framed as the attacker, and afterward both Lester and Ulis would end up injured following their duel. Hearing this only made Lester even more furious. He immediately attacked Silas with his weapon, but a figure dressed entirely in black suddenly appeared and blocked the strike. Surprised, Lester asked whether this person was one of the allies Silas had been boasting about. Soon, 2 more figures appeared. Silas proudly introduced the 3 of them as his precious dolls. A moment later, the figures removed the cloaks covering them. Silas explained that these were not ordinary dolls. Unlike typical creations, they did not rely on any mechanical equipment whatsoever. Seeing this, Ulis finally realized that this was Silas's true ability. Lester immediately unleashed Blasphemia in an attempt to destroy the dolls. Most of them were taken down, but one managed to endure the attack and continued advancing toward him. Lester moved forward, intending to finish the battle quickly. However, several other dolls suddenly opened fire from different directions. The barrage struck him and forced him to the ground, causing Ulis to become concerned. As Ulis tried to help Lester, Silas stopped her. More of his dolls began appearing one after another. Silas revealed that he had strengthened their resistance to fire specifically to counter Ulis's abilities. The dolls quickly surrounded her. Lester could not believe that Silas had resorted to such underhanded tactics. Even so, he declared that he could defeat Silas no matter how many dolls were sent against him. Soon, even more dolls appeared and completely surrounded Lester. There were a total of 128 dolls, and Silas ordered them all to engage him. Silas laughed with satisfaction as he watched Lester struggle against the overwhelming numbers. The dolls rushed toward Lester from every direction. One of them suddenly leaped down from above and struck him, causing him to cry out in pain. Ulis tried to come to his aid, but the dolls immediately swarmed around her. She activated Antherinum Majus and destroyed many of the dolls surrounding her. Silas acknowledged Ulis's impressive skill, but he remained confident that she could still be defeated because he possessed far more dolls than she could handle. Ulis fought them one by one in close combat. During the battle, she pierced one of the dolls with her attack, but instead of falling, it grabbed hold of her. Silas laughed and ordered several more dolls to fire at Ulis. Ulis raised a wall of flames to shield herself from the incoming shots. Most of the projectiles were blocked, but one managed to graze her left thigh. The injury caused her considerable pain, and the surrounding dolls quickly restrained her, leaving her temporarily unable to break free. Silas acknowledged just how powerful Ulis was, but he believed that her weakness had narrowed her perspective. Ulis pointed out that the academy backing Silas was Alicant. There were not many academies with mass-produced defensive technology capable of withstanding both her attacks and Lester's. Silas did not deny it, and he had no intention of letting Ulis go so easily. Silas struck Ulis's injured thigh, causing her to cry out in pain. At first, he had intended to wear her down gradually, but he decided it would be better to finish things quickly. One of Silas's puppets moved in to deliver the final attack, but fortunately, Ayato arrived just in time and immediately destroyed it. Ayato apologized to Ulis for being late. Ulis was shocked to see Ayato come to her rescue. Ayato carried Ulis to a safer location. Ulis asked what he was doing there. Ayato admitted that he had come specifically to save her. Ulis firmly reminded him that the situation she had been facing was her own problem and should not have involved him. She scolded Ayato for putting himself in danger to help her, even though he knew the risks. Ulis had once told Ayato that she fought to protect the children at the orphanage because it was a goal she had chosen for herself. In response, Ayato asked who was going to protect Ulis. The question caught her completely off guard. Ayato explained that for a long time, he had been searching for what he could do and what he was supposed to do. After meeting Ulis, he finally realized that she had dreams she wanted to achieve and the strength to make them a reality. He had also discovered his own purpose. Ayato wanted to become a source of strength for Ulis. Embarrassed by his words, Ulis called him an idiot. Suddenly, Silas appeared before them. He recognized that the power Ayato had used earlier was the ability of Cerberesta. Curious Silas wondered whether Ayato and Ulysses could defeat more than 100 of his puppets. Ayato remarked that Silas only knew how to rely on surprise attacks. In response, Silas immediately deployed all of his puppets, launching a coordinated assault against Ayato and Ulysses. Ayato activated his power without holding anything back. He released the tremendous strength within him and charged into battle against Silas's puppet army. In an instant, puppet after puppet was destroyed. Silas stared in shock, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Fear became visible on his face as he witnessed the overwhelming power Ayato possessed. Ulysses could only wonder who Ayato really was. Feeling embarrassed, Ulysses asked Ayato to put her down because she did not want to be a burden. However, Ayato asked her to hold on a little longer because he still had to deal with Silas. Silas then summoned another formation of puppets. Calling it the power of the Malzalkor, he confidently declared that Ayato would never be able to defeat it. The puppet army continuously fired at Ayato. While carrying Ulysses, he deflected the incoming shots and pressed forward. He swung his sword again and again, cutting through Silas's puppets one after another. Ayato quickly realized that Silas could only control 6 types of puppets simultaneously. 16 of them operated according to several specific patterns, while the rest followed simpler movements. From those observations, Ayato concluded that Silas was using principles similar to chess strategies. Hearing that, Silas became furious and was determined to stop Ayato immediately. His puppets continued their relentless assault, but Ayato skillfully destroyed every one of them. As his puppets were split apart one after another, Silas could hardly believe it. The sword Ayato wielded seemed capable of cutting through anything. Ayato declared that Silas's game was over because every single puppet under his command had been destroyed. Silas lowered his head in frustration, but he refused to give up. Instead, he prepared to unleash a hidden power. Suddenly, Silas's queen puppet appeared. It was enormous and far more powerful than any of the puppets that had come before it. Silas ordered the giant puppet to eliminate both Ayato and Ulysses. As the queen puppet advanced, Ayato let out a quiet sigh and avoided its attacks. He concluded that the best approach would be to pierce its core and disable its massive arms. Ayato then activated the second Amajiri sword, the 9-tusked blade. Moving with incredible speed, he leaped into the air and struck from every direction. In moments, the queen puppet was sliced into numerous pieces. Terrified, Silas fled and landed on one of the falling fragments. He rose into the air in an attempt to escape from Ayato. Ayato commented that Silas was incredibly stubborn. He asked Ulysses to wait for him because he needed to pursue Silas. However, Ulysses insisted on helping. She did not want to keep relying on Ayato alone. Using the power of Strelitzia, Ulysses lifted herself into the air, and together they chased after Silas. Ulysses was eager to bring the battle to an end. Silas had never expected Ayato to continue pursuing him. In panic, he pleaded for Ayato to stop. Ayato ignored the request, destroyed the remaining sections supporting Silas, and sent him falling from the sky. Ayato was confident that a fall from that height would not immediately put Silas in serious danger, since Silas was also a Genestella. On top of that, Claudia was already waiting below and ready to handle the situation, so Ayato and Ulysses decided to leave the rest to her. Silas was terrified when he saw Claudia approaching him. Meanwhile, Ayato and Ulysses took a moment to enjoy the beautiful view from above. They looked at each other and shared a smile. Suddenly, something strange happened. Ayato grimaced in pain as he felt as if his entire body was being bound by invisible chains. Not long afterward, he lost consciousness. Ulysses had no idea what was happening to him and repeatedly called out, trying to wake him up. Back when Ayato was still a child, Haruka apologized for sealing away his overwhelming power with her own ability. Ayato cried out in pain and reached for Haruka's hand. Haruka promised that she would always protect him, but Ayato also wanted to become strong enough to protect her. After that, Haruka said goodbye and told him how much she cared about him. That memory appeared in Ayato's dream. Ayato eventually regained consciousness, much to Ulysses' relief. He soon realized that he had just awakened after passing out. Ulysses told him not to push himself too hard. She had already contacted Claudia and asked her to come pick them up. Ayato felt incredibly grateful, but Ulysses quickly dismissed his thanks. In her eyes, he was the one who had saved her. Only then did Ayato realize that his head was resting on Ulysses' lap. He immediately tried to sit up and apologized. However, Ulysses told him to stay where he was because she did not mind at all. Both of them seemed nervous, as it was the first time they had ever been that close to each other. Ulysses then asked who had sealed away Ayato's tremendous power. Ayato tried to look away, but Ulysses fixed him with a serious gaze. Finally, he admitted that it was his older sister who had sealed his power. His sister's ability was one that could imprison and restrain anything by force. Ulysses was shocked to learn just how immense Ayato's power really was. Ayato explained that he could only release that power for a short period of time. This was the first time he had managed to maintain it for as long as 5 minutes, and his current condition was the result. Ulises asked why his sister had chosen to do such a thing. Ayato admitted that he wanted to know the answer as well, but Haruka had disappeared without a trace 5 years ago. Even so, he believed that Haruka must have had her own reasons for sealing his power. After a brief pause, Ayato asked whether Ulises had already found a partner for the Phoenix Festa. With some hesitation, he asked if she would consider becoming his partner for the tournament. Ayato openly acknowledged that he was not particularly extraordinary and that his abilities alone were not enough to stand out. However, he believed that with determination and sincere resolve, he could stand beside Ulises in the Phoenix Festa. Ulises smiled and once again told him not to overexert himself. She pointed out that his normal level of strength would not be enough to support her in the tournament, and she was certain he did not want to end every match in the same condition he was in now after releasing his sealed power. Ayato replied that he did not mind. He had finally discovered what he truly wanted to be. He wanted to become a source of strength for Ulises. Ulises immediately blushed, her face turning bright red. Ayato noticed, but she quickly denied being embarrassed and told him to stop looking at her. Then, in a shy voice, Ulises asked whether he was truly serious about partnering with her. Deeply moved by his words, she remarked that Ayato was a very unusual person. Meanwhile, Silas was making his way through a narrow alley when a knife suddenly landed nearby. The attack had come from Claudia. She swiftly struck toward Silas, causing him to collapse to the ground. At that moment, Eiichiro appeared and commented that Claudia might have gone a little too far. Claudia calmly replied that her attack would not put Silas's life at risk because he was still useful to them. She then handed the remaining matter over to Shadowstar and instructed Eiichiro to extract every piece of information Silas possessed. Eiichiro accepted the assignment enthusiastically. He then wondered how Ayato and Ulises were doing. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was being observed by a student from Alicant Academy named Ernesta. After listening in, Ernesta concluded that it was finally time to move forward with the next stage of her plan, especially now that she had already obtained the data she needed. One day, Claudia attended a meeting at the Rika Academy Conference Hall, located inside Hotel Elnath. Several student council presidents representing different academies were present. The attendees included Dirk, the student council president of Le Wolf Black, Shuma, the student council president of Alicant, Singlo, the student council president of Geelong, Ernest, the student council president of Garrardworth, and Claudia, the student council president of Sado-Kan. Ernest welcomed Claudia warmly, and she greeted everyone with a friendly smile. After that, Ernest invited the participants to begin the meeting. Claudia wondered about the absence of the student council president from Queenvale Academy. Ernest explained that Queenvale's president was currently on a tour across Europe. Claudia commented that the world-famous idol was truly impressive and had an incredibly busy schedule. Dirk casually remarked that the meeting would not be affected whether Queenvale's student council president attended or not. Ernest immediately reminded Dirk to show more respect toward a representative from another academy. Dirk remained frustrated because that individual had missed many previous meetings. The discussion grew tense for a moment, but Singlo noted that Ernest and Dirk always seemed to have a spirited rivalry and encouraged them to keep the meeting focused on its purpose. The meeting then moved on to the main agenda. Dirk brought up the topic of Sado-Kan and Alicant working together to develop a new type of Lux weapon. Claudia admitted that she was surprised the news had spread so quickly. She confirmed that Sado-Kan would indeed be sending technicians to Alicant. Dirk pointed out that a secret agreement would violate the Stella Carta. Shinglo added that Sado-Kan's technology and Alicant's technology were vastly different. Dirk then asked whether Shuma, as Alicant's representative, had any concerns regarding the collaboration. Shuma explained that his role was simply to approve the project and that he was not involved in its technical details. Claudia felt that everyone had misunderstood the situation. According to her, it was not a secret agreement at all, but an official collaboration whose details would be announced publicly very soon. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. In exchange for using Alicant Academy's facilities, Sado-Kan would support up to 70% of the research and development costs. Shinglo mentioned hearing rumors about the incident at Sado-Kan and the involvement of the Shadow Star. She suspected that the agreement might be connected to that event. Claudia simply smiled and stated that she did not fully understand what Shinglo was referring to. She then suggested that they move on from the topic. As Ernest prepared to discuss the day's agenda, Shuma suddenly requested an additional discussion item. He wanted the representatives to examine the treatment of artificial intelligence within Asterisk and the Festa tournaments. Meanwhile, Ayato was running through a school corridor when he accidentally bumped into a girl. He quickly checked to make sure she was unharmed. Feeling embarrassed by the unexpected collision, he immediately apologized. The girl also appeared flustered by the situation. Ayato noticed a small twig caught in her hair and gently removed it for her. After thanking him, the girl's uncle called out to her, revealing that her name was Kirin. Kirin's uncle, Koichiro, seemed impatient after waiting for her. Kirin quickly said goodbye to Ayato and hurried away. Ayato then headed off to meet Yulise, who was already waiting for their training session. During their practice match, Yulise launched her Livingston Daisy attack toward Ayato. He successfully blocked it, leading Yulise to acknowledge how agile and reliable his defense had become. Curious about his limits, she followed up with another attack. Ayato skillfully avoided the assault and rushed toward Yulise. As he closed the distance, Yulise unleashed a Glariosa explosion around him. She initially believed the attack would be enough to stop him, but Ayato endured it and prepared to use his Amajiri Shinmei-style technique, the 10/Scarlet Sword Art. In the end, Ayato emerged victorious in that day's training match. Yulise felt somewhat disappointed because she had believed she had a good chance of winning. Ayato admitted that the final exchange had been extremely close and that Yulise had nearly claimed victory. He also realized that Yulise possessed a much wider variety of techniques than he had expected. Yulise confirmed this and then asked about his condition. Ayato guessed that maintaining his ability for 3 minutes still did not seem to place a significant burden on him. Yulise believed that if he could sustain his technique for that long, he would be capable of handling opponents at her level. Ayato disagreed, insisting that there were not many students as strong as Yulise. Although Yulise was pleased to hear the compliment, she believed that there were probably more than 20 students at Asterisk who were at least as strong as she was. Yulise then mentioned several of the strongest students from various academies. Among them were Ernesta, the student council president of Garrardworth Academy, a sword expert who had earned the title of Holy Knight, and Tsinglo, the student council president of Geelong Academy, whose abilities were often described as being on another level, even though she was still too young to participate in Festa tournaments. Ayato knew of a famous student who had won the Linevillas Festa twice in a row. That student was Ophelia from the Wolf Academy. Yulise was also familiar with her. Ayato was surprised to see how gloomy Yulise suddenly looked. Yulise explained that they still had one advantage. Ayato's abilities had not become widely known yet. News about him becoming the user of Servaresta had probably spread already, but even if people knew about Servaresta's abilities, that did not necessarily mean they could counter them. Yulise wished Ayato could use the weapon without having to remove his restraints. Ayato, however, believed that Servaresta might not accept him unless he released all of his power. With 1 month remaining before the Phoenix Festa began, Yulise reminded him not to reveal his abilities in meaningless duels. Not long afterward, Lester and Saya came to meet them. Saya complained that Yulise was being unfair because she kept spending time alone with Ayato, from class all the way until after school, and was always keeping him to herself. Annoyed by the accusation, Yulise told Saya to stop making assumptions because she and Ayato were only sparring together. Meanwhile, Ayato asked Lester how he was doing. He also wondered why Lester had come to see him and why he was with Saya. Lester replied that he had simply happened to run into the short Silas on the way there. Saya was offended by Lester's remark. She then thanked him for helping her earlier. At the same time, Lester thanked Ayato for helping him during the Silas incident. Ayato smiled when he heard that. Soon after, Claudia arrived with 2 young women. She introduced them to Ayato and the others. They were Camilla and Ernesta from Alicant Academy. Claudia explained that Seidokan and Alicant were collaborating on the development of a new Lux model. Camilla and Ernesta had come to handle matters related to that agreement. Yulise was convinced that this arrangement was connected to the Silas incident. Since Seidokan preferred not to let the matter become public, the Academy had chosen technological cooperation with Alicant instead. Claudia pretended not to know anything about it, but Yulise decided not to press the issue, especially since they had already come to Seidokan Academy. Suddenly, Ernesta became excited and said that she wanted to meet Silas in person, the swordsman who had sliced through the adorable dolls she had created. Her behavior was very childlike. Yulise did not like it and asked her to stay away from Ayato. In response, Ernesta openly admitted that she liked Ayato. She quietly told him that things would not be as easy as he expected from now on. To everyone's surprise, Ernesta then greeted Ayato with a friendly kiss on the cheek. Yulise immediately shouted in shock, while Saya was clearly upset by what she saw. Ernesta simply laughed and explained that it was nothing more than a casual greeting. Camilla became embarrassed and apologized for Ernesta's behavior, saying that she had always been like that. Camilla then suddenly commented on Saya's weapon, noting how unusual it was. According to her, it was made by forcibly combining 3 manadites together. Saya was surprised and asked how Camilla knew that. Camilla explained that such matters were her area of expertise. In her opinion, the weapon should no longer be used because the technology behind it had been rejected 10 years earlier due to its incomplete development. She explained that the weapon increased Lux output by forcibly applying Meteor Arts through the injection of prana into the manadites. As a result, every attack required a recovery interval, and it appeared that this weakness had never been fully resolved. Saya acknowledged that explanation, but she could not accept Camilla speaking negatively about her father. She demanded that Camilla take back her remarks. Camilla was surprised to learn that Saya was Dr. Sasamiya's daughter. Even so, she refused to withdraw her statement. She pointed out that Dr. Sasamiya had been expelled from both Alicant and the Ferrovius faction after his defection. As a representative of the Ferrovius faction, Camilla stated that she could not overlook those actions. Seeing the atmosphere becoming increasingly tense, Claudia asked everyone to return to the main topic. Camilla apologized and prepared to continue the discussion, but Saya still insisted that she retract her earlier comments. Ernesto remarked that Camilla had always been stubborn and suggested that a duel might be the only way to settle the matter. Saya asked whether that meant she should challenge Camilla to a duel. Ernesto laughed and said that Camilla would undoubtedly refuse such a challenge. However, she revealed that both she and Camilla had already registered for the Phoenix Festa. After that, Camilla, Ernesto, and Claudia quickly departed. Suddenly, Saya informed Ayato that she had decided to participate in the Phoenix Festa as well. Ayato asked who her partner would be. Since the Phoenix Festa was a team competition, Saya revealed that she intended to invite Ayato to be her partner. The moment she said that, Yulise immediately objected, reminding everyone that she had invited Ayato first. Meanwhile, Lester decided it was best to leave and walk away from the argument that had broken out between them. Meanwhile, Ernesto was walking around with Camilla. She had not expected to see Camilla become so emotional that her behavior ended up provoking Saya. Camilla explained that she had not been trying to provoke anyone and had simply been speaking honestly. She then asked Ernesto what she thought about Ayato. Ernesto felt that they still needed to gather much more information about him, especially with the festa approaching and Claudia already making preparations. Camilla wondered whether Ernesto was planning to take any action. Ernesto laughed and said that she would do whatever was necessary to make her wishes come true. Later that day, Ayato was walking through the school corridor with Eiichiro. Eiichiro explained that Alicant's curriculum was divided into research classes, which focused on developing luxe weapons, and practical classes, which focused on preparing students for the festa. The research classes held greater influence within the academy. Furthermore, those research classes were divided into multiple factions that competed with one another for facilities and highly talented students. At that time, the most influential faction was Ferrovius. Suddenly, they came across a tense situation involving Kirin and Koichiro. Koichiro was extremely upset because he believed Kirin had been challenging his authority. When it seemed that the situation might escalate further, Ayato stepped in to stop it. Although he did not know the details of their disagreement, he felt that treating someone that way was not appropriate. Koichiro claimed that he was merely acting as Kirin's uncle and trying to discipline her, so he did not want outsiders interfering. He told Ayato to leave immediately, arguing that a Genestella would not be affected by something so minor. Ayato disagreed and pointed out that such actions could still hurt someone. Koichiro then asked for Ayato's name. After hearing it, he mocked Ayato for not even being listed among the named cults. Upon seeing Ayato's data and noticing that he used Serveresta, Koichiro suddenly asked what Ayato's wish was. Ayato responded that he wanted Koichiro to stop treating Kirin harshly. Koichiro said that he would agree only if Ayato won a duel. He then ordered Kirin to fight Ayato. Kirin wanted to refuse, but Koichiro insisted. He believed that if Kirin could defeat the wielder of Serveresta, her reputation would rise even further. Kirin apologized and formally challenged Ayato to a duel. Ayato was confused about why he had to fight her. Kirin explained that everything would end there if Ayato chose to withdraw. Ayato then asked what would happen to her afterward. Kirin told him not to worry because it was something she could not change. After hearing that, Ayato decided not to back down. Kirin remarked that Ayato had been very kind to her, and she was confident that she would not lose. She immediately drew her sword. Ayato accepted the challenge and activated Serveresta. Before the duel began, Koichiro advised Kirin not to clash blades directly with Serveresta because it could cut through her sword. The duel began, and both fighters moved with incredible speed and agility. Neither side gained a clear advantage at first. Kirin admitted that Ayato was much stronger than she had expected, which genuinely surprised her. At the same time, Ayato realized just how powerful Kirin truly was. Not long afterward, Yulise noticed the duel. She was annoyed because she had already warned Ayato not to accept challenges so carelessly. Yulise sensed that Ayato seemed to be under pressure. At that moment, Eiichiro commented that Ayato had apparently been hiding his true abilities all this time. He noted that Ayato was facing someone known for lightning-fast swordsmanship. Yet Ayato still did not appear to be using Serveresta seriously. Even so, Kirin continued avoiding his attacks without much difficulty. Yulise was surprised that Eiichiro could follow their movements so clearly. She asked how long the duel had been going on, and it turned out that they had already been fighting for around 4 to 5 minutes. As the duel continued, Kirin became even more impressed by Ayato's skill. Meanwhile, Ayato felt that he was running out of time. He increased his speed, but Kirin successfully countered his advance. She wondered why he suddenly seemed to be in such a hurry. With remarkable precision, Kirin launched another attack toward Ayato. A moment later, the duel came to an end, with Kirin declared the winner. She had successfully destroyed Ayato's badge, securing her victory. Eiichiro believed that the outcome showed Ayato was still not fully accustomed to formal duels. After the match ended, Koichiro instructed Kirin to leave immediately. Kirin apologized to Ayato and quickly departed. Ulises then urged Ayato to leave as well because she believed the effects of his power were already beginning to take hold. She could not understand why he had chosen to challenge the top-ranked student at their school. Ayato was shocked to learn that Kirin was actually ranked number 1 at Seidokan. After the duel, Koichiro remarked that Kirin seemed to be having a difficult time fighting Ayato. Hearing that, Kirin immediately apologized. Koichiro called Kirin a weak child who could only wield a sword, and he claimed that she could become the number 1 ranked student if she followed his guidance. According to him, only his perfect plans could make that happen. Kirin could do nothing but obey her uncle. Koichiro reminded her to always remember his words if she wanted to achieve her goals. Meanwhile, Ulises picked up a towel and handed it to Ayato. Ayato was convinced that Ulises was still upset with him because he had recklessly accepted the duel. However, it turned out that Ulises was also frustrated with the way Koichiro treated Kirin like a tool. In fact, Ulises admitted that she would have been disappointed in Ayato if he had simply ignored Koichiro's behavior after witnessing it. She believed that she would probably have reacted the same way if she had seen it herself. Ayato felt genuinely grateful after hearing her words. Ulises blushed in embarrassment and became flustered, quickly scolding Ayato to hide it. The real reason she was upset was because Ayato had lost the duel. Ulises understood that it had been an unrealistic hope, but even so, she had briefly thought that Ayato might actually be able to defeat Kirin. She acknowledged that Kirin deserved praise for being so strong despite being only 13 years old. Ayato was surprised to learn that Kirin was still 13, as her appearance made her seem older than that. Ulises commented that Ayato seemed unusually attentive toward Kirin. Ulises explained that there were 3 people at Seidokan whom she could not defeat with her current strength. Those 3 were Ayato, Claudia, and Kirin. Ayato was surprised to hear that Claudia was that powerful. Ulises explained that Claudia held the 2nd rank at Seidokan Academy. Known by the title Parca Morta, Claudia wielded Pandora, an ogre lux capable of predicting the future. Rumors even suggested that she could see several seconds ahead. Since enrolling at the academy, Claudia had remained undefeated. Kirin had achieved a similar record, but there was one major difference between them. Kirin was neither an ogre lux user nor a striga. She had secured the number 1 ranking using only her Japanese swordsmanship, something that was far from ordinary. Ulises then reminded Ayato that they needed to rethink their strategy for the Phoenix Festa. Since Ayato's true abilities had already been revealed, the strategy they had prepared earlier was no longer useful. She also told him to pick up his new school badge as soon as possible. Later that afternoon, Ayato visited Claudia in the student council members' lounge. He was surprised to find Claudia relaxing by the pool in swimwear. Ayato explained that he had come to collect his new badge. Claudia handed it to him, and he thanked her. Ayato wondered where Claudia had been keeping the badge. Claudia simply smiled and kept the answer to herself. Claudia admitted that she had never expected Ayato to end up dueling Kirin. She asked whether it had something to do with Koichiro. Ayato then asked if she knew Koichiro personally. Claudia described Koichiro as a troublesome person. She explained that he worked for Galaxy Integrated Enterprise Foundation, the parent organization that supported Seidokan. Koichiro held considerable influence because he was responsible for recruiting talented children. Not only that, but he was also a candidate for a high executive position, or more accurately, someone aiming for an even higher rank within the organization. Because of that, Claudia believed he was taking advantage of Kirin, who was his niece. Ayato finally realized that Koichiro had been pressuring Kirin into fighting. Although Claudia could not say for certain, she believed that Kirin had goals of her own as well. However, securing an executive position would not be easy for Koichiro. According to Claudia, people driven by personal ambitions were not allowed to rise through the ranks of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. Only those who had completed the organization's psychological adjustment program and no longer acted based on personal desires were permitted to advance to higher positions. Ayato was surprised that Claudia knew so much about the matter. Claudia explained that her mother was also an executive within the organization. After saying that, she casually dove into the swimming pool. Afterward, Ayato found himself thinking about what he could do to help Kirin. As he walked toward the school building, he noticed a crowd gathering nearby. Several students called out to him, and he soon discovered that Kirin had come to see him. The two began talking together. Ayato asked why she had wanted to meet him. Kirin explained that she was very grateful to him. Even though they had not known each other before, Ayato had stood up for her against Koichiro. Although things had ultimately ended the way they did, she was still very happy about it. Ayato replied that she did not need to thank him so much because he did not feel that he had done anything particularly significant. As a gesture of appreciation for her strength and determination, Ayato gently patted Kirin on the head. Kirin's face immediately turned red with embarrassment. At that moment, Ayato sensed that someone was watching them. When he opened a nearby door, his suspicion was confirmed. Eiichiro and his friends had been secretly observing them, hoping to gather information. Ayato invited Kirin to take a walk with him. He asked whether she felt nervous. Kirin admitted that she did, since she had never spent time alone with a boy outside of her family because her father had always been very strict. Ayato mentioned that he had heard the Tutu style was known for its strict discipline. Kirin was surprised that Ayato knew about her family's swordsmanship school. Ayato explained that he was also a swordsman, so he was familiar with the Tutu style, a sword technique that moved with the elegance of folded origami birds. Kirin also noticed that Ayato used an ancient sword style. During their duel the previous day, his stance had often been low, he frequently used his legs to deflect attacks, and the starting position of his strikes was relatively high. All of those were characteristics of traditional sword techniques. Kirin added that she could probably tell even more if they ever crossed swords again. A moment later, Kirin realized that she had been talking a little too much. Ayato simply smiled and remarked that she truly loved swordsmanship. Kirin admitted that it was the only thing she was really good at. She described herself as clumsy and timid, but whenever she held a sword, she felt like she could be useful to others. That was why she enjoyed it so much. Remembering how determined and passionate Kirin had been during their duel, Ayato became curious about the reason she fought. Kirin revealed that she fought to save her father. Ayato asked if that was why she followed her uncle's guidance. Kirin explained that her uncle had shown her the fastest path toward achieving her goal, and she was grateful to him for that. Ayato wondered whether she would still feel grateful even if her uncle was benefiting from her success for his own work. Kirin replied that her uncle had provided her with the quickest route toward her dream, and in return, he received something he wanted as well. In her view, it was a mutually beneficial arrangement. Ayato commented that it did not quite seem that way. Kirin guessed that it was probably because her uncle disliked Genestella. Kirin then asked how Ayato usually trained. She explained that ever since enrolling at the academy, she had trained alone, and it still did not feel like enough. Since she was always by herself, she rarely had opportunities for sparring practice. Ayato then invited Kirin to join his training sessions. Kirin asked whether he was sure he did not mind. Ayato said he would ask Ulysse for permission first, but he was confident that Ulysse would agree. Kirin apologized and explained that she had been instructed not to reveal her abilities too openly, especially before the Page 1 tournament. Ayato then suggested that they train together in the mornings instead. Kirin had not expected that she would be practicing one-on-one with Ayato. Feeling a little embarrassed, she nevertheless accepted the offer. After saying goodbye and leaving, Kirin was gone only for a moment before Saya suddenly emerged from the trees and landed on Ayato's back. Her sudden appearance startled him. Saya immediately asked who the girl with him had been. While holding onto Ayato tightly, she continued questioning him until he struggled to speak comfortably. Realizing what she was doing, Saya apologized and explained that she had become so focused on her thoughts that she had not noticed how firmly she was holding him. Ayato asked what she was doing there. Saya explained that she had been looking for him because she wanted to hear his answer about whether he would form a team with her. Ayato apologized and explained that he had already teamed up with Ulysse and had given her his word. Upon hearing that, Saya accepted his decision without complaint. She then asked again about the girl who had been with him earlier. Ayato told her that the girl was Kirin. Saya recognized the name and recalled hearing about Kirin's duel with Ayato the day before. She was surprised that Kirin had such a mature appearance despite being younger. Saya jokingly remarked that the world could sometimes feel unfair. Ayato commented that Kirin was actually quite similar to Saya, since she had also come to the academy for the sake of her father. The next day, Ayato was choosing food in the cafeteria when Ulysse suddenly called out to him. She said that there was something she wanted to ask. Ayato invited her to have lunch with him. Without much hesitation, Ulysse revealed that she had actually come to ask about Kirin. While placing her order, she accidentally touched the selection screen and chose the special spicy curry. Ayato asked whether she was really planning to eat something that spicy. Ulysse replied that what she really wanted to know was what had been going on between Ayato and Kirin. Ayato explained that he and Kirin had been training together in the mornings for the past few days. He then asked whether Yuli's was worried that Kirin might discover her abilities. Yuli's immediately denied it and said that she did not think such a thing would cause any problems. Ayato noticed that Yuli's had not touched her food yet. He suggested that if the meal was too spicy, she could simply order something else. Yuli's firmly replied that she had no intention of wasting food. Yuli's then took a bite of the spicy curry rice. Ayato even urged her not to push herself too hard. While trying to handle the heat, Yuli's insisted that the spiciness was still manageable. Ayato suggested that they switch meals, but Yuli's remained silent for a moment without giving an answer. Ayato assumed that she probably did not want to eat food that had already been touched by him. Yuli's explained that she did not mind that at all. She actually had no problem exchanging meals, but she felt responsible for finishing the dish she had chosen herself, so there was no need to give it to Ayato. Ayato replied that she should tell him about small things like that because they were teammates. After hearing that, Yuli's finally agreed to swap meals with him. Ayato's face turned red and he quickly handed his food to her. However, the moment he tasted Yuli's meal, he let out a startled cry because the food was incredibly spicy. That night, Camilla woke Ernesta, who appeared to be sleeping soundly. Ernesta explained that she had not actually been asleep and had simply been thinking about something. Camilla asked what had been occupying her thoughts. Ernesta wondered whether the people from Tenorio had already started making their move. Camilla reminded her that she would miss her chance if she remained too relaxed, especially since Ayato had already begun taking action. The two of them immediately checked the surveillance cameras and noticed that someone else was running alongside Ayato. Camilla informed Ernesta that the girl running with him was Kirin Silaz, Seido-Kan's top-ranked student. Ernesta became curious about how far they had managed to progress and whether they would succeed in drawing out Magnum Opus. Camilla believed that Magnum Opus was unlikely to appear. Ernesta commented that if the plan failed, the Tenorios probably would not make another move for a while. Camilla remarked that Ernesta seemed to enjoy taking risks and cautioned her not to get carried away. Ernesta simply smiled, finding the entire situation increasingly fascinating. Ayato and Kirin ran together through the heavy fog before dawn. The mist was so dense that visibility had become extremely limited. Concerned that they might get separated, Ayato jokingly suggested that Kirin hold his hand. Kirin was surprised and immediately reached for his hand. Ayato's face turned red in shock. He had only been joking, but Kirin had taken the suggestion seriously. Realizing this, Kirin quickly apologized and let go of his hand. Not long afterward, they sensed that something seemed to be following them. They then noticed a road construction sign ahead on the path they were taking. Both of them felt that more than one presence was watching them, but Kirin had the impression that whatever was observing them was not human. Moments later, a group of strange beasts suddenly blocked their way. Kirin thought the creatures actually looked rather cute. One of the creatures immediately bit Ayato's sword, but fortunately he quickly threw it away from him. Kirin became worried about his safety. When the creature charged at him again, Ayato drew his sword and severed one of its legs. To his surprise, however, the detached limb instantly reattached itself to the creature's body. The beast then launched a fire attack from its mouth. Ayato destroyed the incoming fireball, and when two more creatures leaped toward him, he responded with his 4 strikes technique. Although he successfully cut them down, the creatures regenerated and returned to normal once again. Ayato began to feel as though they were practically immortal. Kirin observed that ordinary slashes and thrusts did not seem to have much effect on them. When one of the creatures lunged toward Kirin, she swung her sword. As it attempted to regenerate, she continued cutting it into smaller and smaller pieces until she finally destroyed its core. Just as she had suspected, the creature did indeed possess a core. Kirin had noticed it because she sensed something unusual in the flow of its prana, and she had always been particularly sensitive to things like that. Ayato picked up the core and discovered that it was synthetic. He became convinced that Alicant was behind the incident. Suddenly, another creature reappeared and attacked Ayato. He quickly ran to avoid it, but the ground beneath his feet unexpectedly cracked apart and collapsed. Ayato nearly fell into the opening below, but Kirin managed to catch him in time. She tried to pull him back up, yet the surrounding ground continued to crumble. As a result, both of them lost their footing and fell to the bottom of the pit. Ernesta and Camilla monitored Ayato and Kirin as they faced the fierce creatures created by Alicant. Ernesta had not expected her first show to end so quickly. Camilla remarked that the real performance was still ahead, which made Ernesta even more excited for the second act. At that moment, Ayato and Kirin fell to the bottom of a deep pit and were swept into a flowing stream. Kirin held tightly onto Ayato because she could not swim at all. Ayato felt guilty that Kirin had become involved in the situation because of him. While observing their surroundings, Ayato commented on how enormous the underground drainage system was. Kirin briefly misunderstood what he meant, but Ayato quickly clarified that he was referring only to the size of the drainage channel. Suddenly, a massive dragon appeared before them. Kirin sensed that the dragon felt very similar to the creatures that had attacked them earlier. Ayato concluded that defeating the dragon was unavoidable. He activated Serveresta and blocked the dragon's attack, causing the creature to retreat for a moment. Kirin worried that she might be holding Ayato back and suggested that he should not concern himself with her if she became a burden. She hated the idea of seeing him get hurt and did not want anyone sacrificing anything for her sake. Ayato gently patted Kirin on the head and reassured her that everything would be fine. He explained that opponents like this would normally be easy for someone with her abilities, but he wanted her to trust him. He believed that his strength was close to hers, and more importantly, he did not want her to think so little of herself. In his eyes, Kirin was kind, strong, and admirable. Activating Serveresta once again, Ayato cut through a supporting pillar to create a safer place for Kirin to take cover. He then grabbed the dragon's head, but it immediately regenerated and reattached itself to the creature's body, just like the monsters they had encountered before. Ayato asked whether Kirin could identify the location of the dragon's core. Kirin observed that the core seemed to move constantly within the creature's body. After hearing that, Ayato realized there was likely only one way to defeat it. Up to that point, no Lux had been capable of fully containing his prana. He enlarged the size of his sword, leaving Kirin amazed by what she saw. The dragon launched a fiery attack, but Ayato avoided it and immediately swung his blade, splitting the dragon's body in two. The core was cut apart as well, and the dragon instantly crumbled and disappeared. However, immediately after the battle ended, Ayato felt as though invisible chains were wrapping around his body. A wave of intense pain overwhelmed him, causing Kirin to panic. Moments later, Ayato collapsed and lost consciousness, and Kirin cried out in alarm. When Ayato eventually regained consciousness, he explained that he could only maintain that level of combat for about 5 minutes. He suspected that he might be able to exceed that limit if he pushed himself further, though doing so would come at a cost. Kirin wondered why he was willing to fight so hard. Ayato revealed that there was someone he desperately wanted to help. Kirin quickly guessed that the person was Yulise. Curious, she wondered whether Ayato had special feelings for Yulise. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, Ayato explained that he simply held Yulise in very high regard and respected her deeply. Realizing that her question had been overly personal, Kirin apologized. As the conversation continued, she almost voiced another thought but stopped herself and instead shifted the topic to why the rescue team had still not arrived. Ayato then asked what had motivated Kirin to come and fight in the first place. Kirin explained that her goal was to save her father, who had been imprisoned after being treated as a criminal. 5 years earlier, a robbery had occurred at a store where she and her father happened to be present. When Kirin was taken hostage, her father stepped in to protect her. During the confrontation, the robber lost his life. Although the incident should have been recognized as self-defense, Kirin's father was a Genestella. As a result, he was accused of wrongdoing and ultimately imprisoned. Kirin admitted that even though she had been only 8 years old at the time, she possessed enough ability to stop the robber herself. However, fear had left her unable to act. Because of that moment of hesitation, she believed her father would remain imprisoned for many more years unless she found a way to help him. It was then that her uncle presented what he claimed was the fastest solution. Following his advice, Kirin came to Asterisk. She felt that she had no choice but to obey him. As far as she knew, everything would work out as long as she followed his instructions. Ayato disagreed. He believed that such a path was not truly her own choice, and that continuing down it would only make her suffer in the end. Kirin insisted that she was incapable of accomplishing anything on her own because she considered herself weak. Once again, Ayato gently patted her on the head and reassured her that she would be all right. He reminded her that she was not alone and promised that he would support her, as long as she pursued the path she genuinely wanted for herself. As they looked at each other, both suddenly became embarrassed when they realized the awkwardness of their situation. They quickly apologized to one another. Kirin then admitted that Ayato's habit of patting her head reminded her of her father, who used to do the same thing. Just then, a beam of light shone down into the pit. The long-awaited rescue team had finally arrived to save them. After that, Kirin met with Koichiro and apologized for causing him to worry about her. Before Koichiro could bring up her upcoming duel opponent, Kirin asked whether his concern came from an uncle caring about his niece or from seeing her as a tool. Koichiro firmly stated that the only thing he needed was Kirin's strength. Hearing that answer, Kirin looked disappointed. Koichiro had learned that Kirin had been spending time with Ayato. He mentioned that Ayato had been involved in a disturbance related to the Alicant situation and advised Kirin not to get caught up in it so she would not suffer any consequences. He also urged her to stop associating with Ayato. However, Kirin refused because Ayato had taught her something very important, and she believed there was still much she could learn from him. Koichiro insisted that Kirin should simply follow his instructions. When he realized that she was standing by her own opinion, he reacted harshly. He reminded her that he was the reason she had achieved the #1 ranking and claimed that without his support she would never be able to win a festa. Kirin admitted that she truly wanted to save her father, but she no longer believed that Koichiro's methods would help her achieve that goal. As the tension between them continued, Kirin finally gathered the courage to stand her ground. She thanked Koichiro for everything he had done for her, but she had already decided to fight in her own way. Otherwise, she felt she would regret it someday. Koichiro questioned what she could possibly accomplish on her own. Kirin answered that she would challenge the opponent she had chosen herself, and this time she would make the decision on her own.